He said, "You're fired, and before you walk out, you will apologize." I said one word, "Sure." My name is Natalie Pierce, 42, operations manager at Lockridge Industrial Systems in Austin, Texas. I'd spent 11 years in that building, running logistics so tight we could ship parts across 3 states without missing a single delivery window. Efficiency was my language. Calm was my armor. But that day, calm felt like a weapon. Across the conference table, Evan Lockridge, our CEO, looked smug in his custom navy suit, the kind of man who thought silence meant submission. His reflection gleamed in the glass wall behind him, tall, polished, and entirely unaware that he'd just handed me the final piece of my exit strategy. "You've embarrassed leadership," he said, folding his hands like a judge. "Our client in Dallas called me directly. They praised your team instead of the executive liaison. That's insubordination in disguise." I didn't flinch. They were happy with the outcome, weren't they? Evan's smile tightened. "That's not the point. You acted without clearance. You overstepped." The truth was simple. He'd botched the client meeting and I'd salvaged it behind the scenes. I wasn't supposed to fix it. I was supposed to watch him fail gracefully. That's how power worked here. Quiet loyalty over competence. He leaned forward. "You'll send an apology email to the client, CC me and the board, clarifying that your comments were personal and not representative of company leadership. Then you'll pack up your desk." I looked at him for a long second, long enough for him to think I might cry or argue or beg. I did none of those. I just said sure, stood up, and smoothed my blazer. The look he gave me, confusion laced with irritation, was my first small win in months. The next morning, Lockridge Industrial Systems smelled of burnt coffee and tension. My badge still worked, for the last time. My desk was already cleared, files deleted, drawers empty, laptop reset. But on Evan's desk upstairs, waiting like a time bomb, was an envelope. Heavy paper, no return name. Just 2 words stamped in black. Legal addendum. He found it around 8:45 a.m. I was already sitting in my car by the river, watching sunlight stretch across the water. My phone stayed silent, but I knew the storm had started. Somewhere inside that glass tower, someone was shouting. 10 minutes later, Lauren Meyer, our in-house counsel, burst into Evan's office holding a stack of papers, her usually perfect hair slightly undone. "Evan," she said, voice tight, "please tell me you didn't just terminate Natalie Pierce." He blinked, annoyed. "Of course I did. Why?" She stared at him. "Because she's the designated compliance signatory for our state contracts. You can't terminate her without board review. You just violated the executive protection clause." He frowned. "What clause?" Lauren dropped the papers on his desk. "The one she wrote." By the time she said those words, I was already across the bridge, heading toward Round Rock, coffee steaming in my cup holder, the morning news humming faintly from the radio. I smiled at the absurd normalcy of it all. Traffic lights, brake sounds, a jogger crossing with her dog. While back at headquarters, my shore was detonating in real time. A week before it all collapsed, I'd been doing what I always did, keeping chaos from spilling into the client reports. Our biggest renewal of the quarter, Fortrax Engineering in Dallas, was about to tank. Shipping schedules were wrong, invoicing numbers didn't match, and someone had promised a rebate that didn't exist. The deal was bleeding, and no one wanted to take the blame. I spent that Monday night in the office alone, The building hummed with the mechanical sigh of HVAC units and forgotten ambition. My inbox was a battlefield of excuses. Ops dropped the ball. Accounting didn't confirm the figures. Translation: Natalie will fix it. By midnight, I'd rebuilt the proposal line by line, correcting every fabrication marketing had slipped through. Around 1:20 a.m., I called Jordan Phillips, Fortrex's operations director, a man who sounded as tired as I felt. Jordan, the new contract draft is in your inbox. Page 8, Section 5, ignore everything above my initials. He exhaled slowly. You're saving this deal, aren't you? Just keeping it alive, I said. Funny, you're the only reason we're still doing business with Lockridge. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. The only reason. I'd heard it before, from clients, from vendors, from people who noticed the work but not the name behind it. It wasn't flattery, it was proof of invisibility. By sunrise, the Fortrex renewal was secured. Evan took the victory call, smiling for the board as if he'd orchestrated it all. Later that morning, an internal memo went out congratulating leadership's resilience and teamwork. My name wasn't on it. I deleted the email and went back to work. 2 days later, a message from Fortrex landed in my inbox. 5 words. You kept your promise. Thanks. I forwarded it to Evan. Renewal confirmed, documentation attached. Protocol, not pride. An hour later, he appeared at my office door. Natalie, walk with me. His tone was too even, the kind that preceded bad news disguised as a discussion. He led me into his glass office overlooking the city skyline. He shut the door. Do you know what that email did? It confirmed we kept our client, I said. It made it look like you did this alone, like leadership was irrelevant. I tilted my head. Was it? His jaw tightened. You embarrassed me, Natalie. You undermined command. That's not something I can overlook. He let the silence hang, waiting for me to apologize. I didn't. Instead, I looked at the photo behind him. Evan shaking hands with Jordan Phillips, smiling for a deal I'd resurrected from ashes. I kept the account, I said quietly. That's what matters. He leaned back. Here's what's going to happen. On Friday, during the staff meeting, you'll read a short statement acknowledging your oversight and apologizing for procedural overreach. Then we'll move on. I blinked once. You want me to apologize for fixing your mistake? I want you to acknowledge your attitude, he said sharply. Your tone sets the wrong example. Something in me froze. Not fear, not anger, just realization. The kind that comes when you finally see the machine from the outside. He waited for a reaction. I gave it to him. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and said softly, If that's your decision. He interrupted. It is. Effective immediately. Then this conversation's over. And I walked out. No box, no tears, no goodbyes, just my phone, my keys, and the calm I hadn't felt in years. That night, the Texas sky was heavy with the promise of rain. I poured myself a glass of red wine, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my personal laptop. Buried deep in a folder labeled Compliance Archive, a file waited. Clause 9.2. Executive Continuity and Legal Safeguard. My eyes traced the words I'd written 2 years ago during a routine contract revision. The clause required written board approval for any termination of the compliance signatory, and listed that name clearly. Mine. Unlawful termination triggered automatic audit and client notification. No shouting, no revenge, just paperwork. Silent, powerful, and patient. I saved the file then, encrypted it, and whispered into the quiet, "Sure."
The next morning, Lockridge Industrial Systems didn't sound like itself. Normally, the building hummed. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, someone always laughing too loud near the coffee machine. But that day, silence carried through the air vents like a warning. By 8:15, Evan Lockridge walked into his office and froze. On his leather chair lay an envelope, heavy, official, deliberate. Across the front, stamped in dark ink, were two words that drained the color from his face: legal addendum. He tore it open, expecting resignation papers. Instead, he found a printed page with three words highlighted in yellow: Clause 9.2 activated. His brows knitted. What the hell is this? He buzzed for HR. Get Lauren from legal, now. Down the hall, Lauren Meyer was halfway through her first coffee when she heard the tone in his voice, the one he used before breaking something he didn't understand. By the time she reached his office, he was pacing like a man who'd found a gun without the safety on. "What's going on?" she asked, already guessing. Evan shoved the paper at her. "This clause, whatever it is, Pierce left it for me. Tell me it's meaningless." Lauren read silently, her lips pressing into a thin line. When she finally looked up, her voice had lost all color. "Oh, it's meaningful. Extremely." Evan frowned. "It's just a legal clause." "It's a compliance clause," she corrected. "The one she wrote. It requires board approval before terminating any executive-level compliance signatory. You signed off without review. That's a breach of federal procurement terms." "I'm the CEO. I can fire who I want." She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Not this one. You just triggered a full audit. Every active contract tied to her signature is frozen until the audit clears. That's roughly $63 million. Evans stared at her. "You're exaggerating." Her phone buzzed. She read the message, then met his eyes. "No, the board liaison has already been notified. The system logged the termination automatically." For the first time since I'd known him, Evan Lockridge went quiet. Meanwhile, I was sitting at a diner off Congress Avenue, a tiny retro place with chipped mugs and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. I'd been there for over an hour, nursing a cup of burnt coffee, pretending to scroll my phone while watching the city move. The waitress topped off my mug. "Rough morning?" she asked. I smiled. "Not anymore." At 9:03 a.m., my phone vibrated. A message from Lauren. "Natalie, what did you do?" I didn't reply. She already knew. Clause 9.2 wasn't revenge. It was protection. One I'd quietly built after watching 3 other women get escorted out of that building without cause. Back then, I'd been the one who filed their exit paperwork, reviewed their termination memos, and caught the legal gaps no one else saw. Each time, HR had used the same phrase, at-will employment. Each time, I'd thought, not anymore. So I rewrote the continuity clause during our Fortrex renewal. No one read it carefully. They just saw a few extra words about governance structure and procedural oversight. Corporate blindness was predictable that way. Now, the blinders were off. By mid-morning, the whispers started. Employees texting under their desks, managers avoiding eye contact. No one knew the details, but everyone knew something big had broken. Inside the executive suite, the mood had turned surgical. Lauren's voice echoed through the corridor. "You can't contact Fortrex until we issue a compliance statement. If they find out we violated protocol, they'll terminate the partnership themselves." Evan's voice thundered in reply. "She's bluffing. She wouldn't burn the company down." Lauren shot back.
She doesn't have to. The contract will do it for her. I scrolled through my email again. Nothing from the board yet. That was good. Delay meant confusion, and confusion meant control. At 10:22 a.m., a new message appeared from an unknown address. Subject: Termination Review Inquiry. Ms. Pierce, please confirm details of your termination for audit verification. Do not delete this email. I smiled, stirred the sugar in my coffee, and typed, Termination executed by CEO on October 14th at 4:32 p.m. without prior review or authorization. Clause 9.2 applies. Documentation attached. Attached were 3 PDFs, my signed termination letter, my compliance contract, and the original clause I'd written, initialed by every board member. I hit send, then set my phone face down. The sound of the spoon against the mug was the only noise I made. Back at headquarters, panic had evolved into chaos. Lauren's assistant stormed in with a printed email. The audit office just acknowledged her claim. They've frozen procurement access. No invoices can be processed. Evan's eyes widened. That can't happen. Override it. Lauren shook her head. You don't override an audit. You wait for it to finish, or you settle. Settle? She's an employee, not a shareholder. She was the compliance officer, she said flatly, which means every deal you've signed in the last 18 months is under her oversight. That gives her leverage you can't buy back. The room went still. Outside, someone whispered, She planned this. Lauren didn't deny it. She did. I didn't check my phone again until 1:07 p.m. A new message blinked across the screen. From Lauren Meyer, General Counsel. Subject: Reinstatement discussion. Natalie, the company would like to discuss temporary reinstatement to facilitate client reassurance. A settlement package will be included upon completion of the audit. Please confirm availability for a brief call today. I leaned back in my booth, watching sunlight cut through the blinds. There it was, the quiet admission of guilt wrapped in corporate politeness. I typed my response carefully, every sentence measured. Lauren, I appreciate the outreach. Before any reinstatement, Lockridge Industrial Systems will issue a formal retraction of my termination letter, a public statement acknowledging procedural error, and a written commitment to third-party compliance review. Financial terms are secondary. I hesitated, then added the last line. My name will not be used to cover someone else's mistake. I hit send, then set my phone face down. The sound of the spoon against the mug was the only noise I made. Back in Austin, the walls at Lockridge HQ were starting to shake. The IT director had disabled Evan's email pending legal review. The board had scheduled an emergency meeting, and by late afternoon, a message leaked through the ranks. All active client renewals paused. CEO review under audit. The office that once ran on fear now ran on whispers. At 4:05 p.m., Lauren closed her office door and stared at Evan across the desk. You need to call her. He scowled. I'm not calling her. Then you're finished, she said simply. That evening, I stood on my apartment balcony, watching the Austin skyline fade into orange. Below, the streets buzzed with weekend noise, laughter, traffic, life moving on. My laptop was open on the patio table, displaying the audit confirmation. The status read, Active, board review scheduled October 17th. I exhaled slowly. 3 days. That's all it would take for everything he built to crumble under the weight of one signature. My own. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the quiet one in the room. I felt like the architect.
The following Monday began like the calm before a courtroom storm. The city felt eerily still. But I knew inside Lockridge Industrial Systems, every fluorescent light was flickering with panic. The board had scheduled the emergency compliance hearing for 9 a.m. sharp. The invite list was short.
Evan, Lauren, the 6 board members, and me. I hadn't stepped into that building since the day I was fired, but I dressed like I owned it. Slate gray suit, hair pulled back, heels that clicked like punctuation marks. I didn't come for revenge. I came for respect they owed me long before this mess began. When I walked through the glass doors, the receptionist's hand froze mid-keystroke. "Miss Pierce," she stammered. "I thought you—" "I'm expected," I said evenly, flashing the board summons. Her mouth fell shut. Every face I passed were the same expression. Recognition mixed with unease. They all knew by now that Clause 9.2 wasn't just a policy, it was a grenade, and I'd pulled the pin. The boardroom was colder than I remembered. Glass walls, white marble table, city skyline gleaming behind it like a stage set. Evan sat at the head, jaw clenched, hands gripping a pen he hadn't written with once. Lauren stood behind him, a legal binder open, expression unreadable. "Miss Pierce," said Chairman Dalton, the oldest man in the room, his tone polite but taut. "We appreciate you coming on short notice. I figured you wouldn't want to start without the woman who froze your contracts," I replied, sliding into my seat. A few suppressed coughs broke the silence. Evan glared. "You think this is funny?" "No," I said, "but I think it's poetic." Lauren cleared her throat, stepping in before he could explode. "Let's begin. The purpose of this meeting is to review the procedural validity of Ms. Pierce's termination and determine the appropriate corrective measures under Clause 9.2. Dalton gestured. "Proceed." Lauren opened her binder. According to the employment contract, Section 9, subsection 2, termination of a compliance signatory requires pre-authorization from the board. No such approval was documented. Therefore, the termination violated both internal governance and external vendor protocols. She paused. Effective immediately, the clause triggered an automatic audit and froze all pending government invoices. One of the board members, Evelyn Torres, finance chair, cut in sharply. "We've lost 3 clients already. Fortrex, Caldera, and Bluestone all suspended renewals. We're bleeding money, Evan." Evan slammed his palm on the table. "She manipulated the system. She planted that clause on purpose." I leaned forward. "You mean the clause you approved? The one you signed without reading? You can call it manipulation. I call it foresight." Dalton raised his hand. "Enough. Miss Pierce, did you intend to use this clause as leverage against the company?" I met his gaze steadily. "No. I wrote it because I watched this company discard people like they were replaceable paper clips. The only leverage I ever wanted was protection, from myself and the position you entrusted me with." That silenced the room. Even Lauren looked down. Evan leaned back, smirking. "So what now? You want your job back?" I smiled faintly. "You think too small." I took a folder from my bag and slid it across the table. "This is a proposal. I don't want reinstatement. I want an independent compliance division under direct board supervision, one that reports outside your chain of command. You can keep your title, Evan, but you lose control." Evan's smirk vanished. "You expect us to hand you authority? You don't have a choice. Without me, the audit doesn't close. The contracts stay frozen. Investors start asking why your CEO can't read what he signs." Evelyn exhaled sharply. "She's right." Dalton looked at her. "You can't be serious." "She's offering us a way out. The SEC is already circling. We need compliance independence to pass review." Evan's pen snapped in half. "You're siding with her?" Lauren interjected softly. She's not wrong, Evan. The clause makes her the only person authorized to sign the audit clearance. No Natalie, no business. For a long, tense moment, no one spoke. The air hummed with the sound of swallowed pride. Dalton finally cleared his throat. Ms. Pierce, if we were to consider this proposal, what do you expect in return? Simple, I said. A formal apology from the board. Public, not private, and a contract that protects every compliance officer after me from retaliation. Signed by all 6 of you. Dalton's gaze sharpened. You're asking us to admit fault, publicly. Yes, I said, because you were at fault. Evan pushed back his chair so hard it screeched. You're insane. You think humiliating us will make you a hero? I looked him dead in the eye. I don't need to be a hero, Evan. I just need to be heard. Lauren turned to the board. We can fight her, but it'll take months, legal fees, halted contracts, stock collapse, or, she looked at me, we accept the proposal, close the audit, and control the narrative. Evelyn nodded. The shareholders will choose the latter. Dalton exhaled through his nose, defeated. Draft the agreement. Miss Pierce will reconvene tomorrow to finalize terms. I stood. I'll be here. As I turned to leave, Evan muttered, You'll regret this. I paused by the door, looked over my shoulder and smiled. You already do. That afternoon, the news broke before I even left the parking garage. Lockridge Industrial Systems launches internal audit after compliance scandal. A journalist from Austin Ledger had picked it up. Within an hour, every outlet from Forbes TechWire to Bloomberg Legal had the headline. I sat in my car watching the notifications pile up, one after the other. The public story painted it as a compliance oversight. The internal memo called it a procedural dispute. But the truth was simpler. They fired the wrong woman. That evening, as the city lights flickered on, Lauren called. You won, she said quietly. It's not about winning, I replied. Could have fooled me. I smiled faintly. They'll call it negotiation, but you and I know it's a reckoning. She hesitated. He's not taking this well. I wouldn't expect him to. She sighed. Just be careful, Natalie. When powerful men lose control, they stop playing by rules. I looked out the window at the skyline, the reflection of streetlights on glass. Then I guess it's a good thing, I said quietly. I wrote the rules. By the next morning, Lockridge Industrial Systems wasn't just a corporation, it was a crime scene without the yellow tape. Every department was whispering. Emails were being deleted faster than they were sent, and the elevator chatter had turned into courtroom speculation. I'd woken up to 47 notifications, half of them from reporters. The story had evolved overnight. What began as compliance miscommunication had mutated into corporate retaliation scandal exposes CEO misconduct. The headlines were doing the heavy lifting for me. At 8 a.m., I received a message from Lauren. Meeting moved to 10. Evans trying to block your proposal. Board divided. Be ready. That last part, be ready, told me everything. Evan wasn't conceding quietly. I dressed in navy this time, not gray. Gray was negotiation. Navy was war. When I stepped into the glass tower, I could feel the change in air pressure. The receptionist didn't meet my eyes. The security guard, someone who used to wave me through with a grin, hesitated before scanning my badge. Inside the elevator, I checked my phone again. A message from a blocked number blinked on the screen. You're making a mistake. Walk away before you ruin yourself. No signature, but I didn't need one. Evan Lockridge had a temper, but not enough courage to put his name on his threats. The boardroom was colder than usual. The blinds were drawn this time, the skyline hidden. 5 of the 6 board members were already seated, voices low and tight. Evan stood near the window, back turned, as though the city would give him answers the room couldn't. Dalton spoke first. Miss Pierce, Mr. Lockridge has presented a counter-proposal. I folded my arms. I figured he would. Evan turned slowly, the kind of slow that pretended calm, but reeked of desperation. Here's my offer, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Full reinstatement, back pay, and a non-disclosure clause. You get your job and your reputation back. In exchange, you drop your independent compliance division plan and retract your statement to the board. I didn't touch the folder. You want to buy silence. I want to restore order, he snapped. I leaned forward. You want control. Again. The tension was thick enough to slice. Dalton's eyes flicked between us. Mr. Lockridge, the clause issue remains unresolved. He cut him off. This company doesn't need 2 leaders. You're right, I said, calm as glass. It needs one who follows the law. Lauren cleared her throat softly. The audit is still active. Clause 9.2 remains in effect until it's cleared. If Miss Pierce isn't reinstated in some capacity, the compliance freeze stays. He glared at her like she'd betrayed him. You're siding with her? I'm siding with survival, Lauren said. The SEC requested access to your internal communications. They want everything since her termination. His jaw tightened. What does that mean? It means, I said evenly, they're looking for evidence of retaliation. The word hit him like a slap. Retaliation was the one thing a CEO could never spin. It was poison for investors. Evelyn Torres spoke next. We've lost 4 clients in 48 hours. Stock dropped 9% overnight. This isn't sustainable. Dalton rubbed his temple. Then what do you suggest? Evelyn turned to me. Miss Pierce, if we accept your independent compliance division, can you guarantee the audit will close favorably? I can guarantee it'll be honest, which is more than anyone's had here in years. Dalton hesitated. And if we don't? I glanced at Evan. Then I'll take the documentation I have, including the signed clause, internal memos, and every timestamp from the audit to the Federal Compliance Review Board myself. His face went pale. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Lauren broke the silence. She's bluffing. But she wasn't looking at me when she said it. She was looking at Evan, testing him, seeing if he believed it. He didn't. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Dalton called for a recess. Evelyn argued about damage control. Lauren tried to mediate, but Evan was already spiraling. I stepped out of the room, letting the noise fade behind me. In the hallway, employees were pretending to work, eyes darting, whispers following me like shadows. As I waited for the elevator, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Harper, one of the analysts from finance. Natalie, she whispered, you need to know something. Evan's been deleting emails. He told IT to wipe compliance chatter. They refused, but he tried. I finished. She nodded nervously. There's a backup server, encrypted copies of everything. Lauren knows. That changed everything. I spent the next hour at a small cafe across the street, my laptop open, VPN humming. If there was one thing I'd learned from years in compliance, it's that systems remember what people forget. I accessed the secondary server, backed up automatically by protocol. There they were: corporate communications, termination drafts, HR coordination. Every deleted message timestamped, every directive tied to his account. And right there in the middle of it all, a single thread titled Pierce Removal Strategy. My stomach twisted. The email was dated 1 week before my termination. From Evan Lockridge to Lauren Meyer, HR Director. We need her gone before the audit cycle. Make it clean. We'll handle the fallout later. I sat back in my chair, heart steady, mind already building the plan. By 3 p.m., I sent a single email to the board. Attached correspondence demonstrating premeditated termination and obstruction of compliance oversight. Audit documentation included. Recommend immediate leadership review. Within 15 minutes, the company intranet lit up like a Christmas tree. Internal alerts, legal review requests, locked accounts. Evan had wanted to make me an example. Now, he'd become one. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Same one as before. You just buried us both. I typed back, "No, Evan. I just exhumed the truth." At 6:47 p.m., the Lockridge press release went live. Effective immediately, CEO Evan Lockridge is placed on administrative leave pending internal investigation. Interim leadership appointed by board. Social media detonated. My inbox flooded. My name was trending alongside his. Some praised me, others called me reckless. I didn't care. The city outside my window looked different that night. Sharper, alive, almost electric. I wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Power doesn't surrender quietly. But for the first time in years, the company that once silenced me had to answer for every word it ignored. And the man who fired me was about to learn that retaliation cuts both ways. The night Evan Lockridge was suspended, Austin didn't sleep, and neither did I. The city hummed like a power grid running on scandal. Every outlet, from Bloomberg to The Verge, had the same breaking headline. CEO suspended amid compliance scandal. Insider claimed retaliation. My name wasn't just in the story anymore. It was the story. By sunrise, I was sitting on my balcony with a cup of black coffee and 100 unread emails. Half were from reporters. The rest were from ex-employees, people I barely remembered but who remembered me. They wrote things like, "You did what we couldn't. Thank you for standing up. You don't know how much this means." Every message was a ghost of someone who'd been silenced, and every one of them reminded me, this was never just about me and Evan. It was about the system he thought he owned. At 9 a.m., Lauren called. Her voice sounded brittle. "The board wants to meet again, today." "Let me guess," I said. "They're scared?" "They're furious," she corrected. "You leaked those emails?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "No, I sent them to the board. Someone else leaked them. Maybe your server wasn't as secure as you thought." She sighed. "You're walking a tightrope, Natalie." "I built the rope," I said. By noon, the Lockridge Tower was under siege. Reporters lined the sidewalk, security guards blocked the doors, and a convoy of black sedans signaled that the board had assembled. I arrived last. The moment I walked in, every conversation stopped. Cameras flashed. Someone whispered my name. Inside the boardroom, Dalton didn't bother with pleasantries. Ms. Pierce, I'll be direct. This situation is unsustainable. Our stock has dropped 15%, our clients are panicking, and our CEO has retained private counsel. I met his gaze. So you're asking what I want? Evelyn leaned forward. What do you want, Natalie? I placed a single folder on the table. Final terms. My division, my team, my authority. Non-negotiable. You issue a public apology, not just to me, but to every employee terminated without review under Evan's leadership. And you commit to a third-party ethics monitor for 3 years. Dalton frowned. That's excessive. It's accountability, I said. Something this company's allergic to. Evan wasn't in the room, but his presence was everywhere, his voice echoing in the tension, his shadow clinging to every decision. Lauren broke the silence. There's another issue, she said carefully. Evan's attorneys sent a notice. He's claiming wrongful suspension and breach of contract. He's threatening to sue the company and you personally for defamation and data theft. Dalton's face hardened. On what grounds? Lauren looked at me. He says you illegally accessed private communications. I didn't flinch. The backup server is property of Lockridge Industrial Systems. I accessed it under my compliance credentials, which were still active when I was fired. His mistake, not mine. Evelyn glanced between us. If she's right, his claim won't stand. Dalton sighed. This company can't survive another lawsuit. We need to end this now. For the next 2 hours, the board debated. Voices rose. Accusations flew. I sat quietly, letting them drown in the noise they once used to bury me. Finally, Dalton looked at me, exhausted. If we meet your terms, will you close the audit? I nodded. Once the apology is public and the new division is ratified. He exchanged a look with Evelyn, then said softly, Consider it done. By that evening, Lockridge Industrial Systems released its second press statement in a week. The board of Lockridge Industrial Systems announces the establishment of an independent compliance division led by former compliance officer Natalie Pierce. The company acknowledges procedural errors in recent employment actions and reaffirms its commitment to transparency and ethical governance. I read it twice. Every word tasted like victory and restraint. But one thing was missing. Evan's name. They had scrubbed it clean. An hour later, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. No threats this time, just words. You won your little war. Don't forget who taught you how to fight. Evan. Of course. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back. You didn't teach me how to fight, Evan. You taught me why I had to. I hit send and deleted his number for good. 2 days later, the audit officially closed. The final report cited executive misconduct and procedural oversight, legal euphemisms for we messed up and she caught us. Lockridge stock began to recover. Clients returned. The media moved on to the next scandal. And me? I moved into my new office, the corner one Evan used to occupy. No nameplate yet, just sunlight flooding through the windows and a quiet reminder that every empire built on arrogance eventually collapses under its own paperwork. Lauren visited that afternoon. She lingered by the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. You really did it, Natalie. No, we did it. You warned me. You stood up when it mattered. She smiled faintly. So what happens now? I looked out the window at the skyline, the reflection of glass and steel stretching toward a sky that didn't seem so unreachable anymore. Now, I said, we build something cleaner, something that outlives men like him. That night, as the city lights shimmered below, I opened the last email from the audit team. The subject line read, "Final Notice, Clause 9.2, Closed." I stared at the words for a long moment before archiving it. That clause had started as a line of text, a safeguard, a whisper on paper, but it became something else. Proof that when the system fails, knowledge can be the sharpest weapon in the room. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and smiled. I hadn't just survived the storm. I'd written the rules for the next one.